I built my empire with my bare hands and a brilliant mind. Ashford Pharmaceuticals started in 1975 with a single patent my late husband left me and a toddler daughter named Veronica. While other widows might have sold that patent and lived modestly, I saw potential. I saw lives that could be saved. 27 years later, in 2002, my company was worth $520 million. We employed 3,000 people. Our breakthrough autoimmune treatments had saved countless lives. I'd built the Crescent Bay Medical Center, funded scholarships for women in STEM, and earned the respect of everyone who mattered. Everyone except my daughter. Veronica married Dominic Sterling that spring, a charming real estate developer with expensive cologne and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I gave them $5 million as a wedding gift. I thought it would be enough. I was wrong. Money is never enough for people who measure their worth by what they own rather than what they give. The drugging started so gradually I didn't notice at first. Paolo, the private chef Dominic hired for us, made exquisite meals. But after 3 months of eating them, I began forgetting things. Names. Meetings. Entire conversations. I'd find myself in rooms with no memory of entering them. I'd wake at night screaming at threats that weren't there. My hands trembled constantly. Words escaped me mid-sentence. My board of directors began exchanging worried glances during meetings. Veronica started attending those meetings, sitting beside me, gently finishing my sentences when I faltered. "Mother's been under so much stress," she'd say with such tender concern. "Perhaps it's time to consider retirement." I visited 12 doctors. Each one found nothing physically wrong. "Stress," they said. "Early onset dementia, perhaps. Age catches us all eventually." I was 60 years old. My mind had always been my sharpest weapon. Now it was betraying me. What I didn't know, Paolo was mixing a cocktail of drugs into my food. Benzodiazepines. Anticholinergics. Substances that mimic dementia symptoms perfectly. What I didn't know, Veronica and Dominic were filming my worst episodes. Building their case. Preparing to take everything. Dr. Herman Weiss had kind eyes and a reassuring voice. "Mrs. Ashford," he said gently, reviewing charts I couldn't focus on. "I'm afraid the tests confirm early-onset Alzheimer's disease with psychotic features. Your cognitive decline is significant and will only accelerate." I stared at him, trying to process his words through the fog in my brain. "No," I whispered. "That's not. I'm not. I know this is difficult," he continued. "But your family loves you. They want to ensure you're safe. I'm recommending immediate conservatorship and supervised care." Veronica squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "We'll take care of everything, Mother. I promise." What I didn't know, Dr. Weiss had just deposited $500,000 into an offshore account. The diagnosis was completely fabricated. My actual cognitive tests were normal. He'd simply destroyed them and created new ones showing severe impairment. What I didn't know, this was the beginning of my disappearance. The conservatorship hearing happened so quickly I barely understood what was occurring. Judge Bernard Cross presided with stern efficiency. I tried to speak, to defend myself, but the words came out scrambled and confused. The drugs in my system made coherent thought nearly impossible. Veronica took the stand, crying beautifully. "My mother built an incredible legacy, Your Honor. But she's not the woman she was. Last week, she forgot my name. Yesterday, she attacked our chef, accusing him of poisoning her. She needs help." They played videos, me screaming at shadows, wandering confused through my own home, unable to remember basic facts. I wanted to shout that it wasn't real, that something was wrong with me, but it wasn't this. But when I tried to speak, only confused rambling emerged. Judge Cross granted full conservatorship to Veronica in January 2003. Within hours, my assets were frozen. My access to accounts, properties, and my own company, gone. That evening, two men in white coats arrived at my home. "Mrs. Ashford, we're taking you somewhere safe, where you can rest." I fought them. I screamed. They documented it as violent psychotic episode. They took me to Ocean View Psychiatric Hospital. What I didn't know, Judge Cross had just received $750,000. Dominic owned Ocean View through shell companies. And Veronica had already begun planning my funeral. Ocean View wasn't a hospital. It was a cage. They kept me in a locked ward with barred windows. Heavy doses of antipsychotics turned my mind into sludge. When I tried to tell nurses I was being poisoned, they wrote "paranoid delusions" in my chart. When I insisted I was Beatrice Ashford and demanded my lawyers, they noted "grandiose delusions, identity confusion." Days blurred into weeks. The medications were destroying what was left of my clarity. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the chemical haze, my mind fought back. During brief moments when nurses forgot doses or I managed to hide pills, I began to understand the truth. This wasn't illness. This was conspiracy. My daughter had stolen everything. And now she was erasing me. I learned about my own funeral from a nurse who thought I was too medicated to understand. "Such a shame about Mrs. Ashford," she said to a colleague while checking my vitals. "Did you see the news? The pharmaceutical woman died in this very facility last week. They had the governor at her memorial." I stared at the ceiling, my mind suddenly crystal clear despite the drugs. They declared me dead. While I lay in this prison, alive and aware, my daughter had buried an empty casket. Had mourned me publicly. Had inherited everything. That night, I made a decision. If I stayed here, I would actually die, either from the medications or from the despair that was slowly crushing my chest. I had to escape. And if the world thought Beatrice Ashford was dead, then she would stay dead. Until the moment she chose to rise again. The opportunity came during a June evening shift change. A new nurse left my door unlocked. The medication cart stood unattended in the hallway. I walked past it, past the nurse's station where two orderlies argued about a basketball game, past the security desk where the guard was eating dinner. I wore stolen nurse scrubs. I walked with purpose, like I belonged. And I walked out the front door into the California sunset. No ID. No money. No proof of who I was. And no one who would believe me even if I could prove it, because according to every official record, Beatrice Ashford was dead and buried. I was 60 years old, confused from 6 months of forced medication, and utterly alone. But I was free. And freedom, I learned that night sleeping under a bridge, is worth everything. Homelessness is a kind of death while you're still breathing. People look through you. Security guards shoo you away like insects. Children point and laugh. Well-dressed shoppers clutch their purses tighter when you approach. I became B, the crazy woman who muttered to herself at Riverside Market. I learned which dumpsters had the best food. Which doorways offered shelter from rain. Which cops would leave you alone and which ones would kick you awake at 3 a.m. and tell you to move along. My hair turned white and matted. My teeth fell out from malnutrition. My skin weathered and cracked. The elegant Beatrice Ashford disappeared beneath layers of grime and desperation. But my mind, once the drugs cleared, my mind came back. Sharp. Clear. Observant. And from my invisible position on the streets, I began to see everything. Riverside Market was where Crescent Bay's elite shopped every weekend. Organic produce. Artisanal cheese. Fresh flowers. The wealthy strolled through the stalls, chatting about their lives, their problems, their successes. I sat on the corner with a cardboard sign, hungry. Anything helps. And they walked past me. Hundreds of them. Thousands over the years. Including my family. The first time I saw Veronica, my heart stopped. She wore a cream-colored dress and oversized sunglasses, carrying bags of produce, laughing with friends. She walked within 3 feet of me. Looked right through me. Kept walking. In that moment, I understood the completeness of my erasure. I wasn't just homeless. I was invisible. A ghost haunting my own life. But ghosts, I decided, make excellent witnesses. The microcassette recorder cost me 3 weeks of begged coins. I found it at a pawn shop, tiny enough to hide in my coat. From then on, I recorded everything. Every observation. Every overhead conversation. Every crime I witnessed. Because Dominic and Veronica couldn't help themselves. They discussed business at the market. They bragged about their successes. They spoke freely about deals and schemes and secrets, never imagining the filthy beggar woman nearby was recording every word. Over months, then years, I documented corporate fraud, real estate schemes, tax evasion, bribery, kickbacks. I befriended other homeless people, some of them former employees displaced when Dominic destroyed companies. They shared documents they'd saved. Evidence they'd kept. I volunteered at Veronica's charity foundation. They loved having homeless people sort donations, made them look compassionate. At night, I copied files. I became a librarian of lies. An archivist of betrayal. And I waited. Paolo found me in 2008, 5 years after he'd poisoned me. He was homeless too. Dominic had him deported to eliminate the witness, but Paolo had returned illegally. Guilt had destroyed him, he drank himself into oblivion every night. One evening, he recognized me. His face went white. "Mrs. Ashford," he whispered in Portuguese. "No, you're dead. I saw the funeral." "Tell me everything," I said. And he did. Through tears and shame, Paolo confessed. The drugs Dominic had paid him to use. The exact cocktail. The timeline. Everything. "I needed the money," he sobbed. "My family. I didn't know they would. I thought you just seemed confused, maybe retire. I didn't know. I should have hated him." But Paolo was a victim too, used and discarded like everyone else Dominic touched. Before Paolo died of liver disease in 2011, he wrote a full confession. Handwritten. Notarized. Signed. I added it to my collection. Tanya Hughes was the nurse who'd questioned my diagnosis at Ocean View. She'd been fired for it, for daring to suggest that my cognitive tests didn't match my symptoms. But before they escorted her out, she'd copied my medical files. I found her working at a clinic in 2009. Took me weeks to convince her who I was. She thought I was delusional at first, just another homeless woman with a fantasy identity. But I described the layout of her old nursing station. Remembered her daughter's name. Recited passages from my own medical charts. Her hands shook as she pulled out a manila folder she'd kept for 6 years. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "Your real tests were normal. Dr. Weiss destroyed them and created fake ones. I tried to report it, but Dominic paid everyone to look the other way," I finished. She nodded, tears streaming. "I'm so sorry. I should have done more." "You did enough," I said, taking the files. "You kept the truth alive." Kyle Sterling announced his run for California State Assembly in 2023. My grandson. I'd held him as a baby. Taught him to read. Believed he was good and kind. His campaign headquarters was near the market. He held rallies there, shaking hands, kissing babies, promising to fight for ordinary families. I attended one rally, standing at the back. When I moved closer, trying to see his face, security grabbed my arm. Kyle glanced over, saw me, and said loudly, "Remove that vagrant. She's disrupting the event." They dragged me away while Kyle's supporters applauded his firm stance on the homeless problem. That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not for myself, I'd survived worse. But for the boy he'd been. The good person I'd thought he might become. Then I dried my tears and documented it. Date. Time. Witnesses. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in their coffin. Madison Sterling had 2.3 million Instagram followers. She filmed lifestyle content at the market every month. Designer outfits. Gratitude posts. Blessed captions over photos of fresh flowers and organic produce. In September 2019, I was lying against a wall, sick with pneumonia, barely able to breathe. Madison walked past me, filming herself. "I'm so grateful for this beautiful life," she said to her phone, stepping over my legs without breaking stride. "Remember to count your blessings, guys." Her followers commented, "You're such an inspiration. Beautiful inside and out. An angel." I watched her post from a library computer later. Saw myself in the background of her video, a collapsed shape she'd stepped over without a glance. That video stayed online. Permanent evidence of her indifference. I saved it. Cataloged it. Added it to the mountain of proof that would eventually bury them all. What my family never discovered, I'd hidden money before they destroyed me. In 2002, sensing Dominic's danger, I'd quietly moved $85 million into an offshore trust in Liechtenstein. It was under my mother's maiden name, Kovac. The trust was managed by Frederick Chambers, my late husband's law school roommate. He lived in Geneva and believed I was living quietly in retirement somewhere in Europe. For 22 years, that fortune grew untouched. $85 million became $247 million through careful investments. Frederick had no idea I was alive and homeless. He thought I was traveling the world, enjoying my golden years. Until 2024, when a librarian named Simone Park sent him an impossible email. A homeless woman claims to be Beatrice Ashford. She knows things no one else could know. I think you should come to California. Frederick flew to Crescent Bay, saw me, and wept. My God, Beatrice. What have they done to you? They took everything, I said. Now help me take it back. The diagnosis came too late to matter. Stage 4 lung cancer. From 22 years of breathing toxic air, sleeping in alleys near exhaust vents, inhaling smoke from fires I'd built to stay warm. Dr. Morrison, a free clinic doctor who actually saw me as human, delivered the news gently. I'm sorry, Beatrice. If you'd had access to healthcare earlier. How long? I asked. 6 months. Maybe less. I nodded calmly. 6 months was enough. Frederick wanted to pay for treatment, but I refused. That money has a purpose. Not saving a life that's already been lived. Saving the truth that needs to be told. Instead, I spent those final months organizing. Every piece of evidence. Every recording. Every document. Frederick helped me create the will. Not just a distribution of assets, a weapon. A final statement. A reckoning. When I died in December 2024, at age 76, I died knowing exactly what would happen next. The truth would finally have its day. The invitations went out in January 2025. Formal. Elegant. Mysterious. You are cordially invited to the reading of the last will and testament of Beatrice Anastasia Kovac Ashford. Saturday, January 18, 2025, at 2 p.m. Crescent Bay Town Hall. All interested parties, beneficiaries, and those who knew Mrs. Ashford in life are required to attend. The Sterling family received special hand-delivered invitations marked required attendance, legal beneficiaries. Dominic and Veronica were intrigued. A secret fortune? European assets they didn't know about? Kyle saw it as a campaign photo opportunity. Madison planned her outfit for Instagram. They had no idea they were being summoned to their own destruction. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Town hall filled with 400 people. The Sterling family sat in the front row, Dominic in an expensive suit, Veronica in pearls, Kyle with his campaign smile, Madison filming subtle Instagram stories. Behind them, former Ashford Pharmaceuticals employees. Displaced families. Town officials. Media cameras. And scattered throughout, homeless individuals in clean donated clothes. Frederick had personally invited every person who'd shown me kindness over 22 years. At the podium stood Frederick Chambers with a leather portfolio. Beside him, 3 FBI agents. 2 IRS investigators. California State Attorney General representatives. The Sterling family noticed the law enforcement presence but assumed it was standard for a large estate. They were wrong. Frederick's voice was steady and clear. Good afternoon. Before I read Mrs. Ashford's will, I must clarify a significant error in Crescent Bay's public records. He paused, looking directly at Veronica. Beatrice Ashford did not die in 2003. She died 6 weeks ago, on December 15, 2024. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Veronica leaned toward Dominic, whispering urgently. The funeral you attended in 2003 was a fraud. The death certificate was forged. The woman you buried was no one, an empty casket. Frederick projected a photograph on the screen behind him. B. The beggar woman. Filthy, toothless, weathered. This is Beatrice Ashford. The woman many of you walked past for 22 years. The vagrant you complained about. The homeless woman who begged for change while her own family spent her stolen fortune. The room exploded. Dominic stood, shouting. Veronica's face had drained of all color. Kyle looked like he might vomit. Madison's phone slipped from her shaking hands. And Frederick, calm as death itself, continued. I, Beatrice Anastasia Kovac Ashford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my estate as follows. Frederick read through the beneficiaries. With each name, gasps filled the hall. $15 million to Simone Park, the librarian who'd finally seen me. $12 million to Marcus Webb, the bank teller who'd shared discarded bank statements that proved the offshore accounts. $30 million to St. Jerome's homeless shelter. $40 million split among 487 former employees Dominic had destroyed. $25 million for families displaced by Dominic's predatory schemes. The list continued. Every person who'd shown me kindness. Every cause I believed in. Every wrong I could help right. And then, to Veronica Ashford Sterling, Dominic Sterling, Kyle Sterling, and Madison Sterling, $0. They are explicitly disinherited. Any contest of this will triggers automatic release of all evidence to federal prosecutors and public media. Veronica screamed. An animal sound of rage and disbelief. Madison sobbed openly. Kyle's campaign manager physically stepped away from him. And Dominic, for the first time, looked genuinely afraid. Frederick opened 3 filing boxes. Mrs. Ashford spent 22 years documenting her family's crimes. Every conversation. Every scheme. Every cruelty. Witnessed from the streets where they'd abandoned her. He presented Paulo's handwritten confession about the poisoning. Bank records showing $500,000 to Dr. Weiss. Bank records showing $750,000 to Judge Cross. Tanya's copied medical files proving falsification. Audio recordings of Dominic discussing embezzlement. Video of Kyle ordering security to remove that vagrant. Madison's TikTok videos with me visible in the background, collapsed and ignored. 22 years of documentation. 600 pages of handwritten journal entries. Each one dated, cross-referenced, supported by physical evidence. The room fell silent as Frederick read from my final entry. To my family, you took everything but my mind. That was your fatal mistake. You made me invisible, and invisible people see everything. I watched you for 22 years. Not one moment of remorse. You deserve everything that's coming. Then he looked at the FBI agents and nodded. Veronica Ashford Sterling, Dominic Sterling, you are under arrest. The FBI agents moved forward with handcuffs. Veronica screamed, clawing at the agents. This is lies. All lies. That woman was insane. Dominic tried to run. State police blocked every exit. Kyle Sterling, you are under arrest for campaign finance violations and money laundering. Kyle's perfect campaign smile crumbled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know where the money came from. Madison Sterling, you are charged as an accessory after the fact. Madison collapsed, sobbing, makeup streaming down her face. At the back of the room, Dr. Herman Weiss tried to slip out. Agents arrested him at the door. Judge Bernard Cross, elderly and frail, suffered a heart attack when approached. Paramedics saved him, he'd be charged from his hospital bed. The media cameras captured everything. The handcuffs. The screaming. The complete destruction of Crescent Bay's most prominent family. And throughout the hall, homeless individuals stood and applauded. A slow, building crescendo that filled every corner. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. The story went global within hours. Homeless woman was secret pharmaceutical mogul documenting family's crimes for 22 years. Hashtag Justice for Beatrice trended worldwide for 3 weeks. Madison's Instagram lost 2.1 million followers overnight. Her remaining followers flooded her posts with comments, "You threw coffee at your own grandmother. How does it feel to be famous for being cruel?" Kyle's campaign imploded. He withdrew from the race in disgrace. Veronica and Dominic were denied bail. Prosecutors showed they'd already purchased properties in non-extradition countries, planning to flee. Within a week, the governor ordered a statewide investigation into conservatorship abuse. Crescent Bay's mayor resigned. He'd accepted donations from Dominic's fraudulent businesses. The Ashford Foundation was dissolved, assets seized, actual charities finally receiving the money Veronica had stolen. And at Riverside Market, people laid flowers where I used to sit. Hundreds of bouquets. Thousands of handwritten apology notes. I walked past you. I'm sorry. I complained about you to security. I'm ashamed. I never saw you. I see you now. Too late for me. But perhaps not too late for them to change. The trials took 6 months. Dominic Sterling, 45 years for conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, money laundering, racketeering. At age 55, effectively a life sentence. Veronica Ashford Sterling, 40 years for conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, attempted murder. Paulo's confession proved she'd known about the poisoning. She attempted suicide twice in prison. They put her on permanent watch. Kyle Sterling, 15 years for campaign finance violations and money laundering. His political career was over before it began. Law schools used his case as a cautionary tale. Madison Sterling, 8 years for conspiracy and accessory charges. Her influencer career evaporated. She became infamous as the woman who threw coffee at her homeless grandmother. Prison was particularly hard for her. Inmates recognized her face. Dr. Herman Weiss, 25 years at age 79, a death sentence. He died of a stroke in prison at 81. Judge Bernard Cross, 20 years at age 82, another death sentence. He died of heart failure at 84. Every conviction felt like closure. But also like sadness. They destroyed themselves chasing money they didn't need. And in the process, they destroyed me. But I'd had the last word. 5 years after the will reading, Crescent Bay had transformed. Everything the Sterlings had named after me was gone, melted down, removed, replaced. In their place, new memorials. A bench at the market where I used to sit, inscribed, "She watched this town for 22 years. We never saw her. Remember her. See everyone." A bronze sculpture at Potter's Field called The Witness, a woman with a notebook, looking at the sky. St. Jerome's Shelter, now Beatrice's House, became a national model for homeless services. Simone Park used her inheritance to become an elder rights attorney, fighting corrupt conservatorship. Marcus Webb opened ethical community banks in low-income neighborhoods. The 487 former Ashford Pharmaceuticals employees pooled their inheritance and restarted the company as a worker-owned cooperative. They named it Ashford Revival Pharmaceuticals. Their first project, affordable treatments for diseases affecting homeless populations. And California passed Beatrice's Law, requiring multiple independent evaluations before declaring someone mentally incompetent, public defenders for all conservatorship cases, and mandatory investigations if a ward dies, without independent verification. My story became a catalyst for change. Not just in Crescent Bay, but nationwide. Walking past Beatrice became shorthand for societal indifference, a reminder to see everyone, help everyone, acknowledge the humanity in every person we encounter. I didn't live to see this legacy. But Frederick told me about it as I lay dying. "You did it, Beatrice," he whispered. "They tried to erase you. Instead, you became unforgettable." I smiled, my hand weak in his. "Good. Let them remember what happens when you make someone invisible. We don't disappear. We watch. We wait. And eventually, we speak." My last breath came easily. I'd carried my burden for 22 years. Now I could finally rest. But my truth would live forever. The beggar woman everyone ignored had become the woman no one could forget. And that, I thought as the light faded, was the sweetest revenge of all.